This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. Today I want to welcome you to our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963.
President John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound in the brain. Dr. Berkeley told me it's a simple matter, Tom, of a bullet right through the head.
That was Malcolm Kilduff, the press spokesman for President John F. Kennedy. Pierre Solinger, who was Kennedy's press secretary, had decided to remain back in Washington that day. It is a day that anyone who was alive remembers. Well, all except for George H.W. Bush. He couldn't remember where he was that day for 30 years. In the late 1990s, Congress passed the JFK Assassinations Record Act, which mandated that all classified documents regarding the Kennedy assassination would be released by 2017 unless the President of the United States decided to hold some of that information or all of that information back. In 2017, I urged President Donald Trump to release all of that information, and I think he gave that extensive consideration. At the end of the day, he released about 80% of the material and would later tell me and Judge Andrew Napolitano, as well as Sean Hannity, that CIA Director Mike Pompeo had persuaded him to hold back about 20% of the data because he said it would reveal the methods and sources of the Central Intelligence Agency. I think that gives you some idea of what to expect in the wake of President Trump's January 23rd, 25 executive order in which he said he was ready to provide Americans with the truth after 6 decades of secrecy. On that date, President Donald Trump signed an executive order that entitled Declassification of Records concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. That executive order establishes a policy that more than 50 years after these assassinations, the victims' families and the American people deserve the truth. Specifically, the President's order directs that the Director of National Intelligence and other appropriate officials should present a plan within 15 days for the full and complete release of all of John F. Kennedy's assassination records, and immediately review the records relating to the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King's assassinations, and present a plan for their full and complete release within 45 days. Now, it's important to note, therefore, that what we are expecting is a plan perhaps as early as next week. And then, according to this executive order, those materials that have been held back from the American people for well over the 50 years will be released. And the president tells me that it will be without redactions. In 1989, I was working for former President Richard Nixon, and I was at his home in Saddle River, New Jersey. At the end of the workday, the president liked a martini. He shook up 2 of his famous silver bullets. He was very proud of his martini-making skills. And I asked him point blank, after he'd had a few cocktails, "Mr. President, who really killed John F. Kennedy?" He looked for a moment into his glass, the swirling shards of ice. "Mr. President, I don't understand." He said, "Well, let me put it to you this way. Lyndon and I both wanted to be president, but I wasn't willing to kill for it." And it was that gave me the impetus to write my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, which was published in 2013. In it, I outlined a plot that I believe involved Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson, the Central Intelligence Agency, Big Texas Oil, but also involved the Secret Service, which very clearly stood down on that day, with a subsequent cover-up by the FBI. Every one of those entities or individuals had a motive. Lyndon Baines Johnson's motive was clear. He was under investigation in the Bobby Baker scandal and the Billy Sol Estes scandal. These were 2 corruption scandals, and Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, had begun telling people that LBJ would be dumped from the 1964 ticket and was facing federal prosecution. The Central Intelligence Agency's motive was clear. They believed that JFK was responsible for the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion. That was an invasion in which the U.S. government sponsored Cuban immigrants to invade Cuba in an effort to topple Castro. For many years, JFK was blamed for not using the U.S. Air Force to provide air cover for the men storming the beaches. Well, as you probably have read in the history books, the invasion was an unmitigated disaster. What we didn't know until 40 years later was that the original plan called for 29 Panamanian-flagged bombers piloted by Cuban pilots that were to provide air cover, but that Charles Cable, the number 2 man in the CIA, canceled that air cover. Interestingly, he was the brother of the mayor of Dallas, Earl Cable, who was a crony of Lyndon Johnson. Then organized crime had their own motive. Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy had taken $1 million from the mob chieftains and in return had agreed to lay off Santo Traficante, who was the head of the mob in Florida, and Carlos Marcello, who headed the mob in Texas and Louisiana. But after the election, when Robert F. Kennedy Sr. became Attorney General, he actually torqued up the deportation efforts begun by the Eisenhower administration to expel those 2 gangsters from the country. And then there's Big Texas Oil. Well, the Kennedys were seeking to repeal the oil depletion allowance, which would have cost the Texas oil barons billions. Today's show features 4 of the most prominent and respected John F. Kennedy assassination researchers who will join us to break down what they think is coming, but also to bring you shocking new information regarding the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I believe that the upcoming revelations are going to cement the CIA's role, as well as potentially reveal the involvement of a foreign country. And no, I don't believe it is Russia or Cuba. So if you want to know more about who killed John F. Kennedy, and you want to have a window into what is coming in these revelations ordered by President Donald Trump, stay with us. We have a show today that I think is going to command national attention, because I have pulled together 4 of the most respected JFK assassination researchers. Now, we all stand on the shoulders of those who went before us, men like Fletcher Prouty, Jim Mars, Gaetano Franzi, Dick Russell, James Tague, Phil Nelson, G. Paul Chambers, Joachim Jostin, Craig Zerbel, and many others. That list is by no means complete, and I don't mean to slight any of the earlier JFK assassination researchers such as Mark Lane. So if you're interested in the who really killed Kennedy and why, I urge you to stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. And joining me now for our 2-hour special on the John F. Kennedy assassination and what we can expect from the upcoming releases ordered by President Donald Trump is my longtime personal attorney, one of the most respected JFK assassination researchers, as well as a longtime conservative and Republican activist, Tyler Nixon. Tyler, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
It's an honor to be with you, Roger. And I think you overestimate my stature, but I've certainly studied both Kennedy assassinations since I was probably 10 years old. So it's one of those topics that you get immersed into, and it's hard to get yourself out. It's so interesting.
Without any question, you have attended more seminars and conferences on the subject than anybody I know. And almost every time I talk to you, I learn something new about the assassination I didn't know. I want to give you a lot of credit today for helping line up some of the most respected and serious JFK assassination analysts. Now, let me say that there's an enormous amount of information here, and we don't always agree with each other in our interpretation of much of the same data. And not all people have seen all portions of what I think is a puzzle. For example, James Douglas wrote a great book, JFK and the Unspeakable, but his focus was on the role of the Central Intelligence Agency. Others, for example, those who ran the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 70s, focused almost solely on the role of organized crime. As I said in the opening, I believe that they, along with others, were deeply involved. But Tyler, as you know, recently Paramount Pictures released a documentary called What the Parkland Doctors Saw. And, what the Parkland doctors saw, many of them, interestingly, still alive, those who attended JFK at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, said that they saw bullet wounds in our 35th president, that are consistent with his being shot from the front and the back. Well, that would mean that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone, as the Warren Commission has claimed, and it also means that there had to be a conspiracy involving others. So this is a decent place to start. Tyler, how many shooters do you think there were, and where were they?
Real quick, I just want to give credit to our fallen friend, Brian Lloyd, who I inherited his massive JFK library, as well as Dr. Cyril Wecht, who was very fond of you, Roger, as some of the people who didn't live to see this day. But I think there were at least three hit teams. And as I'm not going to give away Douglas Horne's presentation, but you'll find out something shocking, even more shocking than the conspiracy scenario that's been posited with a grassy knoll front shooter for the last roughly as long as it's been investigated. And it's interesting that today's show is going to bring together two aspects of the you're going to see the medical side of it. You're also going to see someone on the ground who we've identified, and it establishes, obviously, and it's interesting you say that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act alone. I would argue that really Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act at all. Just one example of this was the paraffin test done by the Dallas police on him immediately upon arrest, or after his arrest, within hours. And he came up positive on his hand, which would be possible because of some of the chemicals he handled in the in the bookmaking process in the Texas School Book Depository, but mainly nothing on his face or cheek. And anyone who's fired anything resembling a high-powered bolt-action rifle knows that you're going to have, when you open that, even just when you open the bolt, you're going to have a spray of the nitrates that's going to cover your face and be somewhere. But he came up negative, which means he could not have fired a rifle that day. And that's and really this whole thing. And I just want to touch on the larger picture. It's very interesting that President Trump, he's moving forward with this, and you deserve such credit, Roger. I mean, as I said to the group yesterday after you spoke, you're the single critical person. You're the only person really that I think brought this to President Trump's attention enough to get it to this phase, which is really just complying with the law, the spirit and the letter of the Assassination Records Act of 1992. But it's interesting that there's only one common thread really between, say, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and the assassination of President Kennedy. And it's the fact that the Secret Service dropped the ball, and there's indications that there was maybe purposefulness there. So kind of an interesting thread. And we'll see the Secret Service is quite the we're not going to get into that so much today, but they had such complicity at certain members that it's horrible. And this truth has to come out in history.
Well, you make an excellent point. It wasn't just a rifle. It was supposedly a $26 World War II vintage Italian carbine, a Carcano rifle, which would have been particularly leaky. Yet Lee Harvey Oswald had no powder burns on his chest or his arms or his face. Therefore, when he says, "I'm a patsy, I didn't shoot anyone," well, we believe that he was telling the truth. We have an extraordinary lineup of true experts today, men that I have enormous respect for. This has been a long process, as those who originally questioned the government's narrative put together by the Warren Commission. By the way, J. Edgar Hoover concluded the FBI investigation into John Kennedy's murder in exactly 7 days. And essentially handed it off to a young Arlen Specter, who was really, in fact, the chief investigator for the Warren Commission, essentially instructing him, along with Earl Warren, the chief judge of the Supreme Court, and Allen Dulles, the former CIA director, who had just been fired by John Kennedy, to rubber stamp the FBI's conclusions. And that is what they did. The FBI, I don't include as being in on the assassination, but being very deeply involved in the cover-up, as we will discuss. In the meantime, folks, this is the Roger Stone Show, and this is our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We're going to have a lot of truth bombs on today's show, so whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We're going to be talking a lot about what we expect to see from the upcoming disclosures ordered by President Donald Trump, who has ordered the declassification and release of all of the records pertaining to the murders of John F. Kennedy, New York Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Martin Luther King. Tyler Nixon is my co-host for today's show. And now we are honored to be joined by Douglas Horne. Douglas Horne graduated cum laude from Ohio State in 1974 with a BA in history. He served on active duty with the U.S. Navy as a surface warfare officer for 10 years, and he worked for the Navy for an additional 10 years in a civil service capacity. Doug Horne joined the JFK Assassinations Record Review Board as a senior analyst on the military records team in 1995 and worked for the ARRB through the final 3 years of its 4-year lifespan. During his tenure there, he was promoted to the position of chief analyst for military records. Doug Horne participated in the review board's deposition of 10 key participants in JFK's autopsy and became the ARRB staff expert on the Zapruder film of JFK's assassination. We're honored to have Doug Horne join us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Hello.
Oh, there he is. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Tyler,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tyler, you want to take the lead here because there's a lot of material. Doug is going to join us for 2 segments because he has a lot to reveal.
Sure. First of all, go to YouTube, and it's Douglas Horne, and Horne was with an E, JFK Assassination, and that's Doug's YouTube page, Douglas Horne JFK Assassination. You'll find some extremely compelling videos. I don't want to waste any time, Doug. It's great to have you on. So we'll jump right into it. Could you give us, say, maybe the top 3 or whatever comes to mind? Your time in the ARRB had to be absolutely fascinating, and so much information came out thanks to yours and your fellow staff members' work. What would you say were the blockbuster revelations for you that came out?
Thank you, Tyler. I'll talk about the 2 most important documents that my team got released, the military records team. The first would be the complete meeting minutes for Secretary of Defense McNamara's Vietnam conference in Honolulu, Hawaii in May of 1963. So before we got the 213-page set of minutes released in full, all we had was a 4-page summary written by one of the people who attended the conference. And, that's not good enough. So we got all 213 pages, and to make a long story short, they verify that McNamara reviewed the plans to withdraw all the advisors from Vietnam. We didn't have combat troops in Vietnam. We only had advisors. And he said, these withdrawal plans are not fast enough. They have to be accelerated. And furthermore, he said, we're going to withdraw 1,000 men by the end of the year, and we don't want them to be individuals. We want them to be complete units. So and he made it clear that he wanted the plans for withdrawal accelerated and that we would be out of there completely by the end of 1965. So those minutes are very important because they show how early these things were being put in place. Now, all those plans were later codified. They were made official on October 11th, 1963, in National Security Action Memo 263. A lot of your audience will know about that already. But this was being talked about in early May of 63 at an official meeting. So we're proud that we got all those minutes released. And the other document, I think, is about 10 times more important. It's called the Northwoods File. So the Northwoods File was something developed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1962 about Cuba. And the Northwoods File was a list of pretexts, lies upon which the U.S. could justify a full-scale invasion of Cuba. So this is before the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is in March of 1962. And so this list of pretexts or lies justifying war were forwarded to the Secretary of Defense by the chairman of the JCS, General Lyman Lemnitzer, on March 13th, 1962. And they included a number of outrageous ideas to justify a U.S. invasion. So one idea was to put friendly Cubans, the ones that had gone to the U.S., to put them in Castro uniforms and have them simulate an attack on the base at Guantanamo. And we would blame that on Castro. Another idea was to sink a U.S. ship, to sink it ourselves in Guantanamo Bay and blame the sinking on Castro, kind of like a revisiting of Remember the Maine incident in 1898, which torched off the Spanish-American War in Havana.
And
Harbor.
the USS Liberty subsequently, though that was not Vietnam, but similarly a pretext.
Yes, the Liberty incident in 67, I think it was a very similar concept. And so I think the two worst ideas in Northwoods, there were two that were really bad. One was to have an American jet, a fighter jet, an F-86, which is a fighter plane used in the Korean War, to have it painted like it was Cuban Air Force, and to simulate an attack on a rail airliner, firing blanks, but making close passes where the pilots would say, hey, we're being attacked by the Cuban Air Force. And that idea was stupid because if anybody had taken pictures of the F-86 out the window, any of the passengers, it would have been obvious it was not a Soviet MiG in the Cuban Air Force. It was an American-made jet. So that was a dumb idea. And the worst idea of all, the most stunning, it sounds like something from a James Bond movie, was to have a charter airliner take off from the East Coast en route somewhere in Latin America. And with a flight plan that said, we're going to fly over Cuba. And the plane would secretly land in Florida at Eglin Air Force Base and discharge all the passengers. Now, the passengers were to be CIA assets, okay? So they were going to be members of the intelligence community, and they would safely get off the airplane. And then at Eglin Air Force Base, an identical airliner painted the same way would take off and would be operated as a drone over Cuba with nobody on board. And that this identical airliner would then be blown up over Cuba.
9/11 anyone?
After playing a tape that said, hey, we're being attacked by Cuban aircraft. Then it would be blown up, and then we would justify an invasion by saying Castro shot down an airliner full of people. Now, not only is this shocking, but it's really stupid because there would have been an international investigation, and it would have revealed, hey, there's no bodies at the crash site.
Yeah,
so
and it would have been over Cuba, apparently. So they would have had control of that. But well, Doug, I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the higher level stuff because you've got great, explosive revelations in the X-rays. But I think Roger, I believe you have a message to share.
Yes, we're going to have to go to a quick commercial break here. One of the things that always interested me is that the Warren Commission was never actually given the actual X-rays of JFK. They were given an artist's rendered illustration of them. For some reason, my old friend Senator Arlen Specter, later a senator from Pennsylvania, but at that point, the district attorney of Philadelphia, essentially on loan to the Warren Commission, had no problem with that. We're going to come back and talk about the medical evidence with our guest, Douglas Horne. By the way, he has a 5-volume memoir of the JFK medical cover-up entitled Inside the ARRB, and he also has a collection of essays entitled JFK's War with the National Security Establishment. They're both extraordinarily compelling. I urge you to get them. But before we get to that, a quick message from our sponsor.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
You know, in these turbulent economic time with the national debt out of control and not sustainable, and with our government just printing money like it's going out of style, now is the time to protect your future, to protect your retirement, to protect your nest egg, your IRA, and your 401k. And the best way you can do that is by acquiring precious metals like gold and silver. The people that I trust to do this are the folks at the Colonials Metals Group. And you can reach them at colonialsmetalsgroup.com/stone, or you can send for your free goldguide.com. They'll walk you through all the benefits of diversifying your portfolio with gold. So contact the folks at colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone, and please do it today. You'll be glad you did.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in our 2-hour special on the John F. Kennedy assassination. We're talking to Tyler Nixon, my personal attorney and a longtime researcher into the JFK assassination. But we're particularly honored to have with us Douglas Horne, who served as a senior analyst on the Assassinations Record Review Board, or ARRB. We're just about to get into the medical evidence pertaining to the murder of President John F. Kennedy. When we had to take a quick commercial break, and now we're back with Tyler Nixon and Douglas Horne. Gentlemen, let's proceed.
Well, I would say real quick, again, go to Douglas Horne, JFK Assassination on YouTube. That's his Doug's YouTube page, and it's got a great detailed videos, hours long, going into absolute meticulous detail. But for today, though, we only have a short amount of time. But Doug, I'm going to let you take it away with what you found in the X-rays. That's probably never been posited before, but is totally plausible.
Thank you. So All you have to do is type in on your search engine Douglas Horne with more on the JFK assassination, and the YouTube channel will pop up, and you'll see many video presentations, including one on the skull x-rays, which is very recent, and I'm very proud of it. So here's what I've learned about the JFK skull x-rays. What I'm doing in that program on my YouTube site is reporting the work of two men, Dr. David Mantik, who's an MD and a PhD in physics, and Dr. Mike Chesser, who's also an MD. And in a nutshell, the JFK skull x-rays today prove that JFK was hit by 3 headshots, not one headshot, as claimed by the Warren Commission. So what we really have in the x-rays today are evidence that he was shot once from behind, low in the back of the head. And by the way, it wasn't from the book depository either. And he was shot twice from the front, twice from the right front. So that's pretty startling information if you haven't ever heard it before. So you can find the evidence for this in my presentation on my YouTube channel. But let me summarize what I just said in a more specific way, if I can. And then I'll talk about the fact that there's also some fraud in the skull x-rays. So what's new in the skull x-rays that was not reported by the Warren Commission or the Clark panel in 1968 or the House Select Committee on Assassinations, what people need to know now is that there is evidence in the lateral skull x-rays of an entry wound in the right temple, just at the height of the right ear, inside the hair, just forward of the right ear in the right temple, and there's another entry wound high in the right forehead, about 4 inches above the corner of the right eye. So those are things that are clearly visible in the x-rays if you know what you're looking at, and I've explained what to look at in my presentation, and which were not reported by the HSCA medical panel or by the Warren Commission or the Clark panel, which I find very disturbing. So Dr. Mantik, one of the two men whose work I'm reporting on, has been to the archives 9 times. I want your audience to understand that. With the permission of the Kennedy family, he's been 9 times. He studied the x-rays extensively with an optical densitometer. He's discovered evidence of forgery, partial forgery, in the skull x-rays, namely that the large exit wound seen at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, the blowout in the right rear of the head, the blowout from a frontal shot, has been covered up in the lateral x-rays, covered up with a very bright white patch, which hides the fact that there's missing brain tissue and bone in that area. So he's discovered that forgery in the lateral x-rays, and he's discovered a false apparent bullet fragment, which is really not a bullet fragment, it's just light blasting on the skull, which is supposed to incriminate the accused assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, but that object on the front-to-back skull x-ray, the AP x-ray, is fraudulent. So if you were to read his book, The Final Analysis by Dr. David Mantik, you'll get a good explanation of how he discovered these things in 9 visits to the archives, and he'll present his optical densitometry data for you to understand. The other physician who I'm reporting on, Dr. Chesser, is the expert on the right temporal entrance wound and the forehead entrance wound, and I really respect his work also. He's a neurologist, so he's very accustomed to looking at
now, did not Dr.
skull x-rays and brains.
Didn't Dr. Chesser note the what they call, I guess, the scatter of metallic? I'm sorry, what are they? The name escapes me. What the term is for it?
The metallic snowstorm.
The
yes,
snow.
Tyler. So the most important thing to understand about this forehead bullet is that if you go to the National Archives in person, like Dr. Chesser did, you will see something that you don't see published in the House Committee report. So what you'll see is a metallic snowstorm of a bullet beginning to disintegrate as soon as it enters high in the forehead. And this metallic snowstorm of 30 or 40 particles is visible if you go and look at it in person, but most people are not allowed to do that. So he's reported on that. He's busted these people.
And again, the significance of that is that the snowstorm indicates a direction from front to rear.
Yes, thank you, Tyler. So here's the deal. When a frangible bullet, a bullet that's a hunting bullet, is not a full metal jacket, when it enters a body, it begins to disintegrate immediately, and the smallest particles get deposited first. And then as you go through the fragment trail in the X-ray, then the particles become larger, and then farther along in the fragment trail, the fragments are much bigger. So the direction of travel in that fragment trail on the lateral X-ray is clearly from front to back, because the smallest particles were deposited at the front and the biggest particles were at the back of the fragment trail in the upper rear of the head.
When we come back, I want to ask Doug Horne about the throat wound. We know that Congressman Gerald Ford, a member of the Warren Commission, at the request of J. Edgar Hoover, actually physically changed the autopsy diagram, moving what was indicated by Dr. Berkeley, who was the Kennedy's physician, took a depiction of a wound in Kennedy's upper back and changed it to his neck. We also know that a tracheotomy was produced so that it would be difficult to determine whether that throat wound was an exit wound or an entry wound. This, by the way, was reported by the New York Times. And when Gerald Ford, later President of the United States, was asked why he had changed the diagram, he said, well, the country needed closure. We're going to ask Doug Horne about that when we come back. Folks, you've tuned in to our 2-hour special on the John F. Kennedy assassination. We're honored to have Douglas Horne. He's with us with another segment. We're going to be talking more about the medical evidence, and then we're going to focus about what happened to John F. Kennedy's body immediately after the assassination. Don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Network.
Oh, yeah.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back with our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy on November 22nd in 1963. We are hopeful that the coming revelations ordered through executive order for the declassification of all of the documents pertaining to John F. Kennedy's murder will reveal many of the things we're going to talk about today, because many of them have not been publicly reported, or if they have not gotten the mainstream media attention that they merit. We're talking to Douglas Horne, who was a senior analyst for the Assassinations Record Review Board, an expert on the JFK's autopsy. Also, and we'll get to this, the famous Zapruder film of John F. Kennedy's assassination. To return to the question we were chatting about before we took a break, I'm interested, Doug, in your views regarding the wound in President John F. Kennedy's throat. As I said, as a member of the Warren Commission, Congressman Gerald Ford, at the request of J. Edgar Hoover, actually takes a pencil and changes the diagram on the official autopsy, moving the wound from Kennedy's upper back to his neck. And then later, between the time that the body goes from Parkland Hospital to the Bethesda Medical Center, there's been a tracheotomy to hide the fact as to whether that was an entry wound or an exit wound. Doug, what say you?
Okay, well, we all know that Ford conducted oral plastic surgery and changed a back wound to a neck wound. Yes, that's correct. What everybody needs to understand, if they're not real familiar with this case, is that all of the Dallas treating physicians were certain on the day he was treated that Kennedy had an entrance wound in his throat, in the front of his neck, an entrance wound fired from the front. And the tracheotomy was performed to allow the insertion of a breathing tube at Parkland Hospital. Now, the problem is that later at the autopsy, I would say, look, you got to understand what happened to his body. It's one of the questions you mentioned before we went on break. This is all interrelated, so if I may digress a bit, I'll get back to the throat wound in a minute. Air Force One landed at Andrews at 6 o'clock p.m. on the day of the assassination. And at 6:10, Kennedy's body supposedly, although it really didn't, supposedly, let's put it this way, his casket left at 10 minutes after 6 in a motorcade going to Bethesda Naval Hospital. That motorcade did not arrive with this Dallas ornate coffin in it until 6:55 p.m. It took quite a while to get there, 6:55 p.m. The problem is that the chain of custody of his body was interrupted, and his body actually arrived at 6:35 p.m. by helicopter before the motorcade arrived from Andrews. So what does this mean? It means quite a bit. First of all, the review board obtained the document, the Marine Corps report of Sergeant Boysian, that says the president's casket arrived at 6:35 p.m. And we have witnesses that say it arrived in the wrong kind of car. It arrived in a black hearse and in the wrong kind of casket. It arrived in a shipping casket, a cheap aluminum shipping casket at 6:35. The motorcade didn't arrive out front until 20 minutes later, and then that car sat out front for 12 or 13 minutes before moving. So what I want the audience to understand is that the autopsy of record didn't really start until shortly after 8 o'clock p.m. And between 6:35, when JFK arrived early by helicopter from Andrews, between 6:35 and 8 o'clock, the wounds were tampered with simply to get access to the brain. So the brain was sanitized by removing all the metal they could find in the brain. That's what was done before the autopsy of record started. So the crime scene was sanitized. All the metal they could find was removed from the brain, and by the way, a bullet was removed from his back, also from between his ribs. So by the time the autopsy started at 8 o'clock, the crime scene had already been violated. And we know this happened because we have two witnesses to this postmortem surgery, a mortician named Tom Robinson and one of the X-ray technicians, Ed Reed, who told us about this under oath in 1997. And I just want people to understand that there was a lot of metal removed from his body that never made it into the official record. So there were 10 tiny fragments removed from the brain in a vial, a test tube. They were never introduced into the official record. There were 4 large bullet fragments, probably more than one bullet, but not quite enough metal to form 2 bullets, but a lot of large metal fragments, 4 of them, removed from his body. And we interviewed the guy that typed the receipt for that. But the federal agent who wanted the receipt took the receipt, the typewriter ribbon, and the fragments with him, and they were never introduced into the official record. So these things are facts. They can't be denied. And getting back to the throat wound, I'd like to make 2 points. First of all, the autopsy photographs show a large gash in the throat, and it's much bigger than the incision that was made at Parkland Hospital. So somebody tampered with that tracheotomy and made it a lot bigger. And actually, in the photograph, it looks like it might be an exit wound, but it was not that large at Parkland Hospital. So it's according to Dr. Crenshaw, who was one of the treating physicians at Parkland in Dallas, the gash in the photographs from Bethesda Naval Hospital is twice as wide than it was in Parkland. So somebody tampered with that wound before those photographs were taken. And I would tell the audience one more thing. There were 4 sets of conclusions about how he was killed, about how JFK was killed in the first 2 weeks after his death. If your only goal is the truth, you don't have 4 sets of conclusions, folks. So all they cared about was what could be sold to the American people. And I'm telling you now that this nonsense about a bullet transiting from a wound high in the back out the front of the throat, this fiction, this fairy tale, was only the last conclusion. So that was in the final version of the autopsy conclusions, in the final autopsy report. But there were 3 sets of conclusions before that that did not posit a transiting bullet. They said there was a shot in the back and no exit for the shot in the back. So there's no reason at all to believe that a bullet went from JFK's back out his throat, and there's no reason at all to believe in the single bullet theory. So that's that.
The importance here.
And there's probably no reason to believe in the Bethesda doctor's findings for sure. I mean, that was they were busy essentially doctoring evidence at the same time as they're supposed to be doing an autopsy, and they're botching it.
Well, the other thing we know is that the doctors at Bethesda were being overseen by a military group, and that General Curtis LeMay, who hated the Kennedys, ordered the removal of John F. Kennedy's testicles, which had nothing whatsoever to do with the autopsy, but speaks volumes about the politicized nature of this investigation. We also know that James Tague, who I interviewed for my book, was a car salesman, had gone down to the site to see the motorcade, and a bullet had hit the curb where he was standing, and a fleck of cement bounced up and grazed his cheek, and he was bleeding. This was seen by a Dallas County Sheriff's officer who insisted that he report immediately to the Dallas police, and he did, expecting that he would hear from them, but he heard nothing. He knew that a bullet had landed essentially at his feet, and he knew, therefore, that the public claims of only 3 shots, all from the back, he knew that there was an additional shot. When he went back to look at the curb, it had already been patched where the bullet hit the curb, and it is only because he was telling this story in a bar, it was overheard by James McNeil, or later of the McNeil-Air report, later an AP reporter, and suddenly Arlen Specter had an extra bullet, and thus was born the single bullet theory, an extraordinary fiction. We'll be right back. This is the Roger Stone Show, and we have our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, so please don't go away.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
This episode is brought to you by Hulu, presenting Paradise. Paradise is Hulu's critically acclaimed addictive drama series, starring Sterling K. Brown, Julianne Nicholson, and James Marsden. The Daily Beast calls Paradise your next TV obsession, and the New York Times says it's exhilarating in all the right ways. Paradise is for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. For more information, visit fyc.hulu.com. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. now is they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back with our 2-hour special on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. I'm joined by Douglas Horn, who is a senior analyst for the the JFK Assassination Records Review Board, and Tyler Nixon, my personal attorney, but a longtime JFK researcher. I want to turn now to the Zapruder film. This, of course, was a film taken by Abraham Zapruder, immediately seized by the government using one of the early video cameras. When I interviewed Arlen Specter for my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, I got him to admit that the Zapruder film was missing frames. So, Doug, tell us, since you are one of the staff experts on this film, which was later sold to Time magazine and kept away from the American public for decades, what was going on with the Zapruder film?
Well, Roger, it's been altered in 3 different ways, and I'm absolutely certain about this. I'll tell the audience what's been altered, and then I'll explain how I know this. First of all, crude black patches have been applied to cover up the exit wound in the right rear of the head. This is the blowout, the occipital parietal blowout that the Parkland doctors saw in Dallas. That's been covered up with crude animation, black patches. And there are 2 patterns of exit debris that have been removed from the film. One pattern of exit debris went back and to the left. That's the exit debris that hit the 2 motorcycle cops. And the other exit debris pattern went straight up in the air, very high in the air. And those 2 patterns of debris have been removed. And that head explosion you see in frame 313, folks, I got to tell you, that's artwork. That's paint. That's a visual effect. So one of the people that I'm proud that I've interviewed, this is after the review board shut down, is Dino Brugione of the CIA. He worked at the CIA's National Photographic Interpretation Center in Washington, and that's the Photo Interpretation Center that did the U-2 photographs for the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Corona satellite photos of Soviet missile sites, etc. And he worked with the original Zapruder film on Saturday night, Saturday, November 23rd, before it was altered. He saw a massive head explosion that went 3 or 4 feet into the air. He clarified later, which you don't see in the Zapruder film, he clarified later that there was a piece of brain tissue or a part of JFK's head that went about 1.5 feet into the air, surrounded by all this white mist. And folks, you don't see that in the film. So I think that's exit debris from the forehead bullet. And then, of course, you don't see the exit debris that went to the left rear either in the film, that hit the 2 motorcycle cops to the left rear of the limousine. You don't see that in the film. So he made briefing boards Saturday night, November 23rd. Then the agents that had brought him the film from Chicago, they took the film somewhere, and we know where they took it. They took it to Kodak headquarters in Rochester, New York. And the film was altered on Sunday, November 24th, crudely altered, I would add, at the Kodak's Research and Development Center called Hawkeye Works, under the direction of the CIA. And this altered film, the sanitized film, showed up again at the NPIC in Washington 24 hours later on Sunday night. So by then the film's been sanitized, and additional briefing boards were made, just paste-ups, blow-ups of individual frames. And those briefing boards survive today. Those are the briefing boards made from the sanitized film on Sunday night. But the briefing boards made by Brugione 24 hours earlier of the film before it was altered, those have not survived. They've been deep-sixed. So this is one heck of a story. I devoted a lot of time to it in Volume 4 of my book. And there's a great video online you can watch on YouTube called The Zapruder Film Mystery, in which Dino Brugione talks at length about his briefing board event on Saturday And he says, no, I didn't make the briefing boards that survived today. Mine disappeared. I didn't make these. So he tells the whole story, or most of it, online, and I encourage people to watch that.
Interestingly, Dan Rather, one of the few journalists to be shown the Zapruder film, insists that Kennedy's head snaps sharply forward.
That's right.
Which, of course, is inaccurate. Some decades later, we would see the film, and Kennedy's head snaps back and to the left. Why would Dan Rather lie about this?
He didn't lie. I'm going to surprise your audience by saying the following. Both Dan Rather and Cartha DeLoach of the FBI, they saw the film before it was altered. They saw unaltered versions of the film. So that snapping forward came from the Dow Tex building. That shot came from directly behind the limousine from the Dow Tex. That was the first of the 3 headshots. So they're seeing the film before it's altered. So what was removed from the film was evidence of multiple headshots happening very close on top of each other. They couldn't have that in the film. So you had a brief car stop removed. A car stop of 2 or 3 seconds was removed from the film, and evidence of multiple headshots falling one on top of each other. And so now the film doesn't show the head going forward. It shows the head going back into the left. And I'm going to surprise your audience again and say the rapidity of that motion, the violence of that back into the left, is because so many frames were removed of the exit debris going to the left rear. If you take a film and you remove a significant number of frames, when it's played back, the motion speeds up because you've taken frames out of the film. So all I'm telling you is that Dan Rather and Cartha DeLoach saw an unaltered film, unaltered same-day copies that were made, and the film now doesn't show what they saw, and the film now doesn't show the 2 patterns of exit debris. But I can assure you that there were 2 patterns of exit debris, one back into the left and one straight up in the air.
All right, we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, Douglas Horne, for joining us today with all these truth bombs about the Kennedy assassination. Tyler Nixon's going to stay with us. You're listening to our 2-hour special on the Kennedy assassination. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back, folks. You are tuned into our 2-hour special on the John F. Kennedy assassination, which we are hosting in anticipation of the disclosure of classified documents ordered by President Donald Trump, consistent with a law passed in the 90s requiring the president to either release all of the documents. We don't have time to talk about the documents pertaining to the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York or Dr. Martin Luther King, but next week we are going to delve into those. Joining us now is J. Gary Shaw, someone I respect as one of the leading experts on this case. Gary Shaw met Penn Jones, Jr., one of the earliest critics of the Warren Commission and researchers looking into the Kennedy assassination, after reading Penn's book, Forgive My Brief. Then Gary Shaw bought the 2 complete sets of the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission report, and he was hooked. We're very pleased to have him with us today. Gary Shaw has crisscrossed the country prior to the internet, interviewing a number of individuals who were directly connected to the case, such as Dallas Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig, Richard Carr, Gary Hemming, Laura Hall, and just to name a few. We'll talk about that, but Gary Shaw, welcome. And then in a few minutes, we're going to bring in Brian Edwards for what I think will be one of the first public dissertations of the story of Roscoe White, which may have some bearing on what we're about to learn from these upcoming disclosures. Gary, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So this is obviously a murder mystery that continues to intrigue the American people. The folks at the National Enquirer once told me that when they had lean financial times, all they had to do was put a JFK assassination-oriented story on the cover, and they would sell 600,000 more copies that particular week than on other weeks. It is one in which, despite the very best efforts of the mainstream media, particularly those at CNN, to continue to push the ridiculous Warren Commission conclusions that Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone nut, a Russian communist, acting alone, killed John F. Kennedy with 3 bullet shot wounds, all shot from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building and all shot from behind. But the American people, if you look at the Gallup poll, they're not buying it. They haven't bought it. And it intrigues me that you have interviewed Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig and Richard Carr, as well as Gary Hemmings. Let's talk about that quickly in terms of their role and what happened to them in this particular historical event.
Well, just the two of them, Craig and Carr, were witnesses to the assassination. And, of course, Roger Craig saw a man who looked exactly like Lee Harvey Oswald, leaving in a manner that was contrary to what the Warren Commission tried to sell us. And Carr basically saw some of the same things, and they corroborated each other.
There were, as I recall, several attempts on Mr. Carr's life after he reported this to the authorities.
Well, I know of one, and it was documented, and Henry Hurt wrote a book, Reasonable Doubt, years later, where he traced down a lot of that. And yes, he did. And a very good man. I interviewed him for a good hour or so and got him on tape, and as well as Roger Craig and others.
I should point out, by the way, that Gary Shaw co-wrote JFK, The Conspiracy of Silence, with Dr. Charles Crenshaw, one of the doctors who attended JFK at Parkland Hospital. That was a #1 bestseller on the New York Times list for paperbacks. He is also acted as a consultant for Oliver Stone's epic movie, JFK. Now I want to bring in his colleague, Brian Edwards. Brian Edwards began researching the Kennedy assassination in 1969. He has also interviewed many of the Dealey Plaza eyewitnesses, as well as officers from the Dallas Police Department, the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, Secret Service agents, Parkland doctors, and several of the medical personnel from the Bethesda Naval Medical Center. It's interesting to me, of course, that in the recent documentary from Paramount Films, the doctors who attended JFK said that they all saw wounds consistent with being shot from the front and the back, and they were threatened and warned by Secret Service and FBI agents that they were never to discuss this. They felt comfortable discussing it only now, decades later. Brian Edwards, thank you for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show.
Oh, thank you, Roger, for having us on. I appreciate it.
All right, Tyler, I'm going to ask you to take the chair here for a moment and introduce the topic of Roscoe White. This is something I was unaware of, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about the Kennedy assassination, having written a New York Times bestseller on it, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. But having studied the published literature, I think you have found an important missing piece of this puzzle. Tyler? Looks like we may have.
I'm sorry, I was going to say it's. Yep,
there you go.
Well, it's certainly. I mean, the testimony or the evidence that's come out is totally. I mean, it's just amazing that it was so obvious in 1963 to people who understood the real politics behind it all. But you know, we've got great guests coming up, and Doug Horn was excellent. I tell you, Roger, this story that the Stone's owners and Stone viewers and listeners are going to hear is amazing. And I'll let you introduce the guests.
All right. So, Gary, you want to take the first shot at telling us who Roscoe White was and what he has come forward to say?
Okay.
Or I should say his relatives have come forward to say?
Right. Roger, back in around 1990, along in that period of time, we had opened a center in Dallas, a center that was going to give basically our knowledge of the truth about the assassination in competition to the Sixth Floor Museum, which had opened about that time. It was during that time that a young man came to see us, and he's Ricky White. His father was Roscoe White, Roscoe Rock White, and he told us a story that just blew us away. And then subsequent artifacts and material that have come forward that his father left him to find confirm just exactly that. It's a story about a Marine who was from Paris, Texas, went into the Marine Corps, went across the seas to the Far East with on the same ship that Lee Harvey Oswald went on, then came back, and after he was, again, he like Oswald, he was given a hardship discharge, and came to Dallas and went to work for the Dallas Police Department in October of 1963. His wife went to work for Jack Ruby in September of 1963. And a couple of weeks later, Lee Harvey Oswald gets a job at the Texas School Book Depository in 1963. And they all come together in a unit that just blew us away. And Roscoe White left a diary, other artifacts that documented and told the story of his participation in the assassination of President Kennedy. This was a man that was a sharpshooter of the best kind in the Marine Corps, top notch. And he, with two other men that were on his team, his code name was Amanda, and the other two men's code name were Lebanon and Saul. And Roscoe fired the fatal shot from the picket fence there in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. So it's quite a story, and it's quite well documented with material that you can find in our book, Admitted Assassin, which came out just last year, and tells the complete story and publishes pictures of the artifacts that he left behind for his son to find and to make public. This was a remorseful dad who left his son the material to tell the story, and it's quite a tragic story, but it's also what we believe to be a true story about what really happened in Dealey Plaza in Dallas in 1963. That, in a nutshell, is how this all came about.
So what reason do we have to believe that Ricky White is telling us the truth?
Well, his father left a diary, which he actually told the story of what happened on November 22nd, 1963, how he fired the fatal headshot. And, his going to work for the Dallas Police Department, one of the people who signed off on him to get that job was a Office of Naval Intelligence man by the name of Mason Langford. And Mason Langford played a role with the Secret Service and the babysitting, you might say, of Marina Oswald after the assassination. So it's quite a story. But he left that, and he left his actual orders on. His orders were on paper, and he hid those away, put them in a manner that would preserve them, so that Ricky could have something. And so there were 3 cables designating his orders for that period of time. There's a multitude of evidence that he left behind for his son to find and follow up on this whole story.
All right, we're going to be right back with Gary Shaw and Brian Edwards. I want to ask Brian to further elucidate the Roscoe White story for us, but he just told us, Gary just told us about naval intelligence cables containing the orders, and it is believed that Roscoe White also is the man who killed Officer J.D. Tippit, often blamed as on Lee Harvey Oswald as further proof that Oswald killed Kennedy. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear us at WABCRadio.com worldwide. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back, folks. You're tuned in for our 2-hour special on the assassination of our 35th president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, on November 22nd, 1963. It always disturbed me, of course, the very well-known photo of President Lyndon Johnson taking the oath of office on Air Force One, simply because by law, as soon as the president is declared dead, the vice president becomes president, and therefore the oath of office is completely unnecessary. We know that LBJ called Attorney General Robert Kennedy, who of course was in shock over the murder of his brother, to ask him to look up the oath that was twisting the knife into Robert Kennedy, who the two men, of course, hated each other. RFK blamed Lyndon Johnson for the break-in at John F. Kennedy's doctor's office prior to the 1960 Democrat Convention, and the leak of Kennedy's medical records that indicated that the candidate, the senator from Massachusetts, had Addison's disease. Kennedy's doctor released a letter denying that Kennedy had Addison's disease. Of course, it was later proved in his autopsy that he did indeed suffer from that adrenal affliction, Addison's disease. And it's also interesting in that if you watch that succession of photos, note the broad grin on Lady Bird Johnson's face, and then Lyndon Johnson actually exchanges a wink with Congressman Albert Thomas, a segregationist Democrat congressman from Texas, a crony of LBJ. We're talking to Gary Shaw and Brian Edwards, as well as Tyler Nixon. I've now read the Chicago Tribune story about Roscoe White, as well as a Texas Monthly magazine. This seems to be groundbreaking information. Tyler, what do you make of it?
Well, I find it astonishing when I saw it. I had heard of Roscoe White, but I didn't realize the type of evidence that was involved that had been found by Ricky White. And so there's two aspects that I wanted Gary and Brian to get into, in the time we have, the fact of the diary's disappearance, I'll let Gary or Brian tell that story. And then, of course, the cables that were subsequently found that reinforce even further everything that he has said, Ricky White has said about what he found and what the contents of his father's, the remains, his physical or his material stuff he left behind after his rather mysterious death also, which they can address as well. But I mean, this to me, and they can again explain, to me it's conclusive. Unless you believe that a hoax this elaborate could be hatched by someone who's just a regular working guy from Texas. But Brian, Gary, take it away.
Brian, let's go to you.
Well, Roger, thanks for the great analysis. It's probably one of the best we've had in a long time of the story. If I could just address the question you asked about why should we believe Ricky White, and you didn't get into my complete background, but I spent 22 years as a law enforcement officer here in Kansas, and 7 years after I retired, I went into 7 years as a private investigator. And during that time, I've interviewed over, I don't 200 or so people, from suspects and witnesses and all that. I've interviewed all the many witnesses in Dealey Plaza. I can tell you without any reservations at all that my very first encounter with Ricky White it was in 2018, and there's no doubt in my mind that the man is telling the story. He simply is, telling us, this is what I found. This is what my dad left for me. I'm not interpreting anything. I'm just telling you what I have. And the story is too complex. The artifacts are too genuine for him to have been able to manufacture this. It would take years to figure out how to make it viable and believable that somebody would ever find these and believe his story. Well, there's no doubt in our minds, and we wouldn't have put our names on it if we didn't believe him 150%. I mean, the guy is one of the quotes that one of the newspaper people did about after an interview with Ricky said, Ricky White could no more explain the origin of the universe than he could explain how these things came about. He found them. He was not looking for them. He just found them. And, he came to Gary and said, here's some material. What do I do with it? What do you think I should, what's the next step? And that's how Ricky contacted. Gary didn't go out looking for this guy. Ricky came to Gary and said, hey, this is the stuff that I have. What should I do with it? And what do I make of it? And so that's how the sincerity and the guy is not telling a lie. I mean, I don't think it's in his blood makeup that he could tell a lie. He's a very sincere young man that just simply is telling what he found. And that's how,
Brian, one of the things we can get into on the other side is what Roger raised at the very beginning of the show. He called it a puzzle. And there's so many pieces of the puzzle that seem to fit perfectly when you take the Roscoe White information, his profile, his activities into account based on what we found. So we can discuss that on the other side of the top of the hour. But Roger.
All right, we'll be right back, folks. Don't go anyway. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. The most powerful, influential, and entertaining AM radio station in the United States of America. I'm joined today to talk about the recent announcement by President Donald Trump that he will declassify and release all the documents pertaining to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York, and Dr. Martin Luther King. We're joined right now by Tyler Nixon, attorney and longtime JFK researcher, J. Gary Shaw, and Brian Edwards. Shaw and Edwards have come forward with shocking information that a man named Roscoe White, a Dallas police officer and a veteran, is most likely, based on his own diary and documents and other materials found by his son Ricky White, the man who shot from the so-called picket fence along the grassy knoll. Gentlemen, welcome to the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC. Tyler, you want to summarize the shocking information that these two gentlemen have brought us today?
Sure, and they can certainly fill in the details, and I'll say it because for me it was I just experienced it for the first time last year in detail, listening to basically Ricky spoke as well as Brian gave the sort of the more detailed summary. But what it comes down to is, and I served in the Army infantry, so anybody who's been in the military knows that certain things don't change over a span of time. Things like how you receive orders, how you stow your gear, and the types of artifacts, let's just say, you would keep after service. And what Ricky has come forward with in the White family is, you look at it, just the pictures of what it was that was discovered in Roscoe White's, Rock White's, his footlocker is just, it is so authentic on its face. And then when you get into the detail of it, you have his diary, which multiple witnesses looked at, where he details what happened on November 22nd, 1963, where he was, what his role was. And interestingly, each aspect of this information, the information contained in it, including the later information in the form of these cables, which are written sort of orders that would come from a military directorate or some sort of agency, in this case internally, sort of totally sensitive inside stuff. He was probably, as Brian noted, Roscoe was probably told to destroy those, but apparently he kept these cables, and they are as authentic as you can imagine. You would have to have served probably in the naval intelligence to understand how to write up one of these, to sound the way the three cables that were found after the disappearance of the diary, which I'll throw to Brian to talk about that, and then what people can see in the cables and why they're so authentic.
Brian?
Yeah, Tyler, the diary, Ricky said that he found the diary inside his father's footlocker in 1982 in Paris, Texas, and he didn't get around to reading it because he was raising two children and had a full-time job, and didn't really sit down and open up that diary until about let's see here, my notes here. About 1989 is when he finally, or 87, I'm sorry, he started reading the diary at specific details, and he kind of skipped ahead to 1963 because everything up to that point had to do with Roscoe's military service and a lot of acronyms that Ricky didn't understand, and finally got to the entry of 1963. And he said on that page and a half, he says, I read that so many times it burned a hole in my brain. He detailed in specifics what he was doing the day of the assassination of President Kennedy, that he was behind the picket fence, and he mentioned the type of weapon he had and what he did after the shots were fired and who was with him on his team, and named him. Gary has already named him, the two men who were with him in different locations. And then later that same day, after he accomplished what he was supposed to do, one of the cables said, your assignment is to eliminate a national security threat to worldwide peace. And, I can't think of anybody else who would fit that bill except the President of the United States. So that clearly is telling the receiver of that particular cable, your assignment is to eliminate Kennedy. And so Roscoe did what he was assigned to do, and then proceeded to, we believe, and certainly in the diary, it supports the fact that he and Officer Tippett got into an altercation about what to do with Lee Oswald. And according to the diary, Roscoe and this is his words, took out an officer at 10th and Patton. Now, unless another officer was at 10th and Patton that day, it had to be referring to Tippit. So, not only did Roscoe implicate himself in the murder of President Kennedy, but he also, in his own hand, wrote that he had killed Officer Tippit. So this is not just a lone nut scenario. This is a complex scenario where multiple entities are involved, and so the three cables have been analyzed by Gary had them analyzed by a former CIA operative who was also head of station in Angola or someplace in Africa, if I remember right. And he said these are authentic. He says, I've seen the similar format. So we know that those cables are authentic, and basically gave him his orders. And then Roscoe decided that at some time in his life that he didn't want to be a part of this anymore. And I think that's what got him killed.
Gary, your thoughts?
Well, what got him killed was he was offered other assignments, it appears, and he rejected those and was very remorseful of the fact that he had killed. He told his pastor when he became remorseful that he had taken lives on both foreign and domestic soil. So he was one that was utilized by whoever his bosses were, and I have an idea. But it's a situation. I wish you could have seen the FBI's reaction to all of this. One of the things they did before they ever knew anything about what Ricky White had, they heard about it and heard about the diary and began to surveil him. And for about 3 days before they finally approached him, they were clandestinely surveilling he and his wife every day for those 3 days. When they came to him, they threatened him with made him read out of the book that he could face federal prison time or a fine if he withheld information from him. Took him down to headquarters and grilled him for at least 3 or 4 hours. Made copies of the diary and made copies of keys to a safe deposit box in which Roscoe had put about $250,000 in. That eventually disappeared after the FBI learned about it. And it's a case, Tyler, that it's just amazing. And the thing about it is, in writing, Roscoe White admitted his participation in the assassination of President Kennedy, hence the name of the book, Admitted Assassin. And in more than one place, he spelled it out. And it's a story that just amazed us and obviously made the FBI very, very mad. And they've lied about it ever since. Of course, you should suspect that or expect that from that agency when it comes to the assassination of President Kennedy. So there's so much to it that it's impossible to go into it in great detail in such a short time. But it's all written out, and people can see photographs of the documentation that his father left behind, and we believe it's very, very important. And I hope that when the files are finally released, we'll get some. We did a Freedom of Information request from the FBI, and they sent us sanitized or redacted copies of their investigation into all of this. And
well, I would say for those who aren't who are novices to the JFK assassination investigation, Gary Shaw is a titan. He's been steeped in the community. He's been researching it almost since the event happened. And so, you're hearing this is coming from not to appeal to authority, but a very authoritative and knowledgeable source who would have vetted this with a great degree of meticulousness. So you're not, when you go pick up your copy of Admitted Assassin, you're going to be blown away by what you see. And it's almost like a Rosetta Stone to the assassination, because it answers so many questions. And maybe we can close out talking a little bit about the pictures that were found amongst the belongings in the footlocker, and which again, these were photographed all together at the time they were found, or roughly thereabouts. So there's no question about the authenticity of them existing, in contemporaneously with each other. This wasn't assembled. But I'll let maybe Brian or Gary, whichever you want, talk about how this affected other photographic evidence in the case, particularly the famous Oswald backyard photo used to very much implicate Lee Harvey Oswald falsely.
Right.
Go ahead, Brian.
In the footlocker, Ricky had discovered inadvertently, by happenstance, found his father's footlocker during his grandfather's funeral, and all the material in there was related to his father. There's letters from home, letters from while he was overseas, military records, photographs, memorabilia that he had saved for posterity, for his own, I guess, for himself or his son or his family. But one of the things that was in that collection of material was a backyard photograph of Lee Oswald that had never been seen before. It was the third backyard photograph. It was a print from the original negative that the Warren Commission had no knowledge about. And so Ricky remembers having those photographs were in a binder that his father had kept in a closet. And Ricky told us kind of covertly that whenever Mom and Dad were gone, his friends would come over and he'd pull that binder out and show these pictures of from the Dallas Police Department's investigation. I mean, these were, original prints from the original negative. So of the property that was seized at the rooming house,
and this included
autopsy photographs of Oswald. These things that nobody else had, and he had access to those things. But that third backyard photograph was very important because, like I said, nobody had ever seen that before.
All right, gentlemen, I'm
There's
afraid
also,
Brian
real
and Gary,
quick,
Brian and Gary, we're going to have to leave it there. Tell folks where they can get your great book, and then Tyler Nixon's going to stick with us for the next segment.
Okay, the book The Admitted Assassin is available through the publisher Peniel Unlimited. It's PENIEL Unlimited, or you can buy it at Amazon. It's available both places. In
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble has it, yes. There are numerous bookstores that are carrying it, but if you don't have it at your local bookstore, you can directly, buy it directly from our publisher, Peniel Unlimited.
All right, Gary Shaw, Brian Edwards, we have to leave it there and go to a commercial break. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this special regarding the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And folks, I urge you to get their book. It is absolutely compelling. Gentlemen, God bless you. And to our listeners, we'll be right back.
Thank you.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is Roger Stone. We're talking about the upcoming disclosures ordered by President Donald Trump of all of the records pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and of course, Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, it is the thesis of my 2013 book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, that Lyndon Baines Johnson was at the center of a plot that involved the Central Intelligence Agency, Big Texas Oil, as well as the CIA. And just last week, a powerful audio tape was released by the grandson of Billy Saul Estes. Now, Billy Saul Estes was a crony of Lyndon Johnson's. He was a Texas wheeler dealer who later went to prison because he was kicking back to Johnson for massive multi-million-dollar agricultural contracts that he had received. And this audio tape has only recently surfaced. The thesis of my book is that the shooter from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building is Malcolm Mac Wallace. I say this because Wallace's fingerprints were found on the window casing and on the cardboard boxes that formed the so-called crow's nest on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. No less than 6 witnesses say that they see a man who meets the physical description of Wallace, middle-aged, of medium build, balding. Every one of them says wearing spectacles. And here is the audio that proves my thesis.
You're good about treating me today. Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Linda and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far. I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike, but we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he's ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did.
Well, you know, Lyndon could have really hit me if he would.
Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been.
Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just kind of blackmailed me to keep my mouth shut. And if I hadn't had a bunch of tapes that I played after he got killed, because, 17 got killed in this situation very mysteriously. And I've done a lot of time, and I've lost a lot of money, and it's hurt my family a whole lot. And it's really got me just disgusted with Lyndon in one way. In one way, I feel real sorry.
Well, let's first of all say that that tape would not have come out, and we would have never heard it were it not for Roger Stone. The person who brought that out, the grandson of Billy Sol Estes, credits Roger's book, the LBJ book, for apprising him of his grandfather's activities. He didn't know about his Billy Sol Estes' involvement with Lyndon Johnson, and the fact that he named Johnson as responsible for, as he mentioned there, 17 murders, including Johnson's own sister, Josepha Johnson.
That is, just to clarify, that is a conversation between Cliff Carter, the executive director of the Democrat National Committee under Lyndon Johnson, Lyndon Johnson's chief political operative, and Billy Sol Estes. There's a reference there to Henry Marshall. Henry Marshall was a Texas Ranger who was investigating Johnson. He was also murdered. He was murdered, according to the local coroner, by shooting himself in the head with his own rifle, which is quite a feat if you can figure out how to do that. But a gas station attendant testified in the investigation that a man meeting the physical description of Malcolm Wallace stopped to get petrol and asked for directions to Marshall's farm. In my book, I make the case that Lyndon Baines Johnson was responsible for as many as 18 murders, including, as Tyler says, that of his own sister, because his sister was kind of a gypsy bohemian. She had gotten involved with a man named Douglas Kinzer, and Malcolm Wallace shot Douglas Kinzer in cold blood in broad daylight and was charged with first-degree murder in 1951. That's how he got his fingerprints, and we know that the fingerprints match those found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. We also know that both Alex Jones and Geraldo Rivera interviewed a woman by the name of Madeline Brown. Now, Madeline Brown was the mistress of Lyndon Baines Johnson, bore him a son who bore an amazing physical resemblance to LBJ. And Madeline Brown says in both those interviews that she spent the night with Johnson, the night before the assassination, in a Fort Worth, Texas hotel where John Kennedy was staying, and that Johnson told her, after tomorrow, I won't have to put up with those Irish SOBs again. Those Kennedys will never embarrass me again. Now, the other confirming factor is a man named Loy Factor has come forward. Factor claims that he was also on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, that he had been recruited by Wallace as a backup shooter, that Wallace had seen him shoot at a country fair shooting contest and had taken his phone number, and almost a year and a half later hired him for an undisclosed mission in Dallas, Texas. Now, Loy Factor is to be believed because he gives an exact physical description of the setup in the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, including very specifically a flat saw that was positioned directly to the right of the window from which Malcolm Mac Wallace shot. There's no way for Loy Factor to have known that had he not been present. There's a jail directly across the street from the Texas School Book Depository building on the other side of DLA Plaza, and at least 3 prisoners there identify, again, a man who meets the physical description of Malcolm Mac Wallace. I think, Tyler, that I have nailed this question. I'm frankly very happy that the president has made this decision. As you know, it was thwarted by CIA Director Mike Pompeo back in 2017, the first time these documents were to be legally released. President Trump told me, told Judge Andrew Napolitano, told Sean Hannity just the other night that Pompeo told him that these documents would expose the methods and sources of the CIA. So I think that gives you some idea about what is to come. There will be an effort by the bureaucrats to try to hold some of this material back. Congressman Steve Cohen, Democrat of Tennessee, and Congressman Tim Burchett, who was on our show here at 77 WABC last weekend, have written to the president laying out a scheme and organization for the release of these documents to ensure that the American people are not deprived of the facts yet again. If you haven't seen the compelling interview that Robert Kennedy gave with Mike Tyson, he says, in investigating his own father's murder, that Sirhan is always in front of RFK, yet the L.A. coroner, Thomas Noguchi, quite famous, said that RFK died of a bullet wound from the left rear of his head at point blank range. That shooter is most likely Caesar Eugene Thane, a man hired shortly before the Robert Kennedy assassination to work in the Ambassador Hotel as a security guard, and who immediately after the murder returned to his native Philippines. That is yet an entire story in itself. The King family, of course, sued the FBI, the Memphis police, and the federal government in civil court, and they won a judgment proving that a civil court judge ruled that the government was involved in the murder of Martin Luther King. We're going to visit both of those on the Roger Stone Show next weekend here on the gem of AM Talk Radio. In the meantime, coming up in our next segment, yes, I'm going to bring you my mother's recipe for meatballs because, well, we always like to talk about food here on the Roger Stone Show. And then Enrique Tarrio, recently pardoned the head of the Proud Boys, is going to outline how the federal government framed him and sent him to prison for 22 years for a crime he did not commit. He was pardoned by President Donald Trump. He's going to join us to tell us exactly what happened to him, the conditions that he was kept in the D.C. jail. So don't go away. This is the Roger Stone Show. I want to thank my co-host, Tyler Nixon, for joining us today. Tyler, God bless you, and thank you for helping helm this great show.
Thank you, Roger. God bless.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world
This is the Roger Stone Show, and one of my favorite segments we try to do for you every week is has to do with food, because, well, I like to eat. Today we have my mother's, therefore my grandmother's recipe for her famous meatballs. Now you're going to need get something to write with real quick here, folks. You're going to need 1 cup of breadcrumbs, 1 pound of ground beef, 1 pound of ground pork, 2 large eggs, 1 cup of grated pecorino cheese, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, some black pepper, 6 garlic cloves chopped. You could go for 7 or 8 as far as I'm concerned. 6 sprigs of flat leaf parsley leaves or stems, and of course you're going to need your basic marinara sauce. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees. You line a rimmed baking pan with aluminum foil. Combine all the ingredients except for the cooked sauce in a large bowl and mix with your hands, being careful not to overmix. If the mixture is too dry, add just a touch of water, perhaps a 1/4 cup. Now, roll the mixture into golf ball-sized balls or ovals and place them in the lined baking pan. Add 1/2 cup of water to the pan and carefully transfer to the oven. Bake for 1 hour or until the meatballs are golden brown. Remove and set them aside. Now, when the meatballs are almost done, place the sauce in a large pot and heat thoroughly. When the oil turns dark and rises to the top of the sauce, drop in the baked meatballs and cook for 1 hour. Marron, my mother's recipe for Italian meatballs. You got to try it out. All right, joining us now, Enrique Tarrio. He is or was the head of the Proud Boys. He was framed by the U.S. government for seditious conspiracy on January 6th. Interestingly enough, he was indicted on the basis of a document sent to him by an FBI informant on his Telegram account that he never even opened. Enrique Tarrio was not at the Capitol. In fact, he wasn't in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. And according to Reuters, they reported on August 20th, 2021, that their investigation indicated that there was no conspiracy by any paramilitary or other radical group to storm the Capitol. Enrique Tarrio was put through hell, framed by prosecutors for a crime he did not commit. I was reunited with him for dinner the other night at one of the best Cuban night spots in Hialeah, and he is none the worse for wear. He never lost his faith, and he joins us now. Enrique, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, thanks for having me on. I appreciate your guests, and I appreciate you guys for supporting us through, what was a very difficult time for not only me, for 1,600 others, and not only a weaponized justice system, but through the torture that the BOP put some of these guys through. We're currently working on civil litigation to go ahead and correct some of those wrongs, and I think the president and the DOJ is currently correcting those wrongs by firing some of these prosecutors and firing some of these FBI agents. So we won't see true justice until all of these things are corrected, and we will see a better America once these things are accomplished.
So, Enrique, for my listeners, I want to be very clear. You were not at the Capitol on January 6th, correct?
Yes, I was not at the Capitol, and not only was I not at the Capitol, I didn't even have a phone. So I don't understand how the government went ahead and not only indicted me, but imprisoned me and convicted me with a jury that was not of my peers.
And as I recall, the government claimed that you had edited this document sent to you by an FBI informant on Telegram when in fact you hadn't even opened it.
So they were very smart in how they indicted me, because what they did is with the grand jury, they showed them this document and they just told them that this document was on my phone. The government knew that this document was never opened by me. I get millions of messages by random people on Telegram, and when they brought their forensics expert on the stand, we asked them very clearly, because I knew I had never seen this document. We asked them very clearly, did Enrique Tarrio open this document? Her simple answer was no. Then we asked her, well, how do you know that? Well, when we pulled the information on the phone, if any of your listeners have WhatsApp or Telegram, they'll notice that there are 2 check marks. When you send a message to somebody, you know that that's red. So the document was never opened. The document couldn't be edited by me because I never saw it.
They charged and convicted you of seditious conspiracy. You went through the same kangaroo court I did in D.C., in which I don't believe that there is an honest, unbiased judge, or one can get a fair, unbiased jury, given the political makeup of the District of Columbia. In my own trial, it amazes me. You can pick 12 people, but not come up with a single non-Democrat, except for the one guy who's in the Green Party, not a single military veteran, not a single Roman Catholic, but several veterans who had worked for the Clinton Justice Department or the Obama Justice Department, and in one case, a woman who had been a law school classmate of one of the prosecutors in my case. It is stunning that my case, I think this may have been true in yours, the judge essentially disallowed any reasonable defense. In other words, the premise of the indictment against me was that I had somehow been involved or intercepted documents that they alleged had come from an online hack by Russian intelligence of the Democrat National Committee. I had expert testimony and forensic evidence to prove that there was no online hack of the Democrat National Committee, that in fact any data that was stolen had been downloaded to a portable drive and removed from the building by someone, but the judge would not allow that. I also could not introduce evidence of corruption by the FBI, by the Department of Justice, by the Special Counsel's Office, or by any member of Congress. I don't want to say any names, Adam Schiff. And of course, that's a violation of the Constitution under Kyles v. Whitley that holds that the integrity of an investigation and an indictment is always grounds for defense. So it is a killing field, and you were a political pawn. Tell us about the conditions in the D.C. jail, although, as I recall, you spent time in multiple prisons around the country.
Well, D.C. jail is very, I guess, unique, but not, I wouldn't say much better than any of the other 40 prisons and county jails I went to. But it is unique in the fact that the officers there are either one way or another. Either they don't care about you, therefore they don't give you the medical attention you need, or they hate you because you are a Trump supporter. But I got that same treatment in all 40 locations that I went to. They would transport me. They had me labeled as a domestic terrorist, so they transport me differently. They put me, and I want your listeners, after they listen to this show, to go ahead and Google what box cuffs are, And it looks like a medieval torture device that you put over somebody's hands. And that is how I spent about 3 years of my life. And I don't. The most nefarious thing about it is how easily one gets adapted to this situation. So I can't say that I was suffering because I got used to it. The people who suffered really was my family, including my beautiful mother that has fought for me nonstop from day one and has kept my name going around everywhere. And I think that's another reason why the president pardoned me. Conditions in the D.C. jail and other jails with food, lack of hygiene. There was one time that I went 3 weeks without showering, without brushing my teeth, and without seeing a single ounce of daylight. So I think criminal justice reform is at the top of my list, but I do want to see justice served on those that committed these acts, not only to me, like I said, those 1,600 other individuals.
The media kept referring to you as a white supremacist and a racist. What, Enrique, what is your ethnicity?
I am a Cuban American, and I'm actually Afro-Cuban, in the fact that my family, my descendants came from Africa, and they also came from Spain. And my family fled communism, and they were surprised that the country that they came and they so loved was doing this to one of their own family members, exactly what they fled in Cuba.
This technique of moving you to 40 different facilities to be incarcerated is what they call diesel treatment. Right now, there is a Green Beret Master Sergeant, Jeremy Brown, also a Floridian, who was pardoned by President Donald Trump, but because a D.C. magistrate ordered a search of Brown's home after Brown refused to become an informant for the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, and he legally taped those two efforts to convince him to infiltrate your group or another group to become an informant. They have refused to release him, saying that his pardon does not extend to the charges based on things they planted in his home, which their own documents say the search was January 6th related. Frankly, I hear from Jeremy Brown's mother and his lawyer, and I have tried to get this case in front of President Trump, because what they're doing to this decorated veteran, who, by the way, was not charged with any violent crime, didn't enter the Capitol, didn't assault any police officers, didn't destroy any public property. His crime seems to be simply refusing to be an informant.
The situation with Jeremy Brown is very important, and I think that those responsible, and I think there's two parties that are specifically responsible for that, is the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshals. I think that the Department of Justice should do their job and investigate if they are holding, and I believe they're holding him illegally. He must be released immediately. And I think the Department of Justice needs to do what they do, and they need to investigate. And if they're keeping him longer than he's supposed to be, which is the case, they need to be indicted and imprisoned.
It is really extraordinary. It's very clear if anyone will read the documents. We had actually Carol Stewart, who is Jeremy Brown's attorney, on the show last weekend. I had really hoped that he would have been released by now. All this would require, by the way, is an order by the acting attorney general to the head of the Bureau of Prisons, and he would be released. But it appears that rogue U.S. Marshals and Bureau of Prison officials continue to hold Jeremy Brown in violation of the law. He is clearly being tortured simply because he refused to become an informant. So I ask our audience out there to pray for justice for Jeremy Brown. This is one of the most egregious cases among those of the many people who were abused on January 6th. We're talking about sentences in many cases for nonviolent offenses like trespassing far longer than the norm. This is a blot on our history, but worse than that, the conditions that these prisoners were kept in violate the Geneva Conventions. In other words, we are treating American citizens worse than we treat terrorists, being deprived of water, living in facilities with backed up sewage, being denied medical attention. We've had some of the detainees lost an eye, others died of cancer because they could not get medical attention. This is, I think, falls squarely on Merrick Garland. When it comes to his record as Attorney General, he makes John Mitchell look like St. Thomas Aquinas. This is the Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC. We'll be back with Enrique Tarrio and a little more political news, so don't touch that dial.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
I hope you enjoyed our previous segment regarding the Kennedy assassination. I want to thank the folks at ProjectJFK.com as well as JFKHistorical.com, both nonprofits dedicated to further research on the Kennedy assassination, for making our guests available to us today. We return to Enrique Tarrio, who endured horrific conditions after being framed for seditious conspiracy, along with a number of others, when the FBI concluded as early as August 20th, 2021, that there was no conspiracy. And as he has outlined for us, convicted on the basis of government-planted evidence from an FBI informant on his Telegram channel. Enrique, what other evidence did the government produce in their effort to convict you of seditious conspiracy if there was no conspiracy?
So another piece of evidence, which was I'm going to use quotes, the damning evidence that they showed the jury, was that I celebrated what happened on that day. Later on, and the day after it happened, and after people left, I made social media posts, and yes, I celebrated what I saw and how I saw it that day, how it was reported is a little different than what we see it now. In no way, shape, or form can I condone any violence that happened that day, but I did celebrate it. So if that was a crime, then I'm definitely guilty of that crime. But they didn't charge me with that, Roger. They charged me with sedition. For those that don't know what sedition is, it's one step under treason. They wanted me to rot in a federal prison for 22 years of my life for social media posts and for a document that I did not read. Other than that, they did not have any evidence of my involvement in January 6th. And really what I was going to do, I did have plans for January 6th. My plans for January 6th was listen to the president speak in the entirety of its speech. A lot of people also don't know this. While the president was speaking, the Capitol was breached. So the president was still speaking. So my plan was to finish that. I had 2 stages to speak on after that. And we had the lead singer of the Misfits, which was going to give us a little unplugged session. His name's Michael Graves. So I don't know how the government, and again, I don't think that the government actually thought that I did it, but how the government thought, or the jury for that matter, thought that I was going to foment an insurrection at 1 o'clock and then at 2:30 be at a hotel in Virginia listening to music and partying with the guys. My sole objective of the day is to make sure that my guys got home safe and that other Trump supporters were safe, and to enjoy the rest of the evening celebrating President Trump.
All right. This is a horrific tale. And again, I urge people to go to Give, Send, Go, because Jeremy Brown and his family need our help. He is, again, a Green Beret Master Sergeant who served his country with distinction, an unblemished record of service to the country. He was pardoned by President Donald Trump literally just days ago, but the Bureau of Prisons refuses to honor that pardon because they claim that a search of his home in Florida that was not ordered by a Florida magistrate, but ordered by a magistrate in D.C., and which the court documents say is in connection with January 6th and an investigation into whether he is a domestic terrorist, found evidence in his home, which was, I guess, two unarmed World War II vintage grenades, which were really keepsakes, two short barrel rifles that even if they were illegal, you would pay a fine for owning them in the state of Florida. And what they said was some cassette tape which contained classified information. That tape did not have Jeremy Brown's fingerprints on it or any of the dog hairs. He's a dog lover, or his girlfriend's fingerprints. Pretty obvious to me that it was planted. You can go to GiveSendGo.com, look up Jeremy Brown. We're not going to give up this fight until the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshals honor his pardon. His pardon very clearly pertains to the results of the search warrant at his home. I want to thank Enrique Tarrio. Enrique, what are your immediate plans? I know you had a thriving T-shirt business before all of this, and are you going to go back to that? And what do you have in mind?
For 3 years, I made all these plans. I wrote it in a notebook because I knew one day I was going to be released early through either appeals or a presidential pardon. And 2 months ago, I kind of sat back and said, you know what? I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to enjoy my family. I'll probably get back into the merchandise business. But again, right now, all I'm doing is enjoying my family, and that's what I plan on doing. If you guys, your listeners, want to keep up to date, I am Noble1, O-N-E, on Twitter. And if I bring the merch site back up, go ahead and click and get some of these cool shirts. And I'm happy to have made the Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong shirt.
You were the original artist behind that shirt, and I raised $15 million. I sold 1,500 of those shirts to pay for my own legal defense. My friend, we have both been subjected to the killing fields of D.C., both framed for crimes that did not exist. In my case, of course, the prosecutors and the judge withheld from my defense attorneys Robert Mueller's final report. And it wasn't until BuzzFeed sued the Justice Department to win release of it. They released that report on midnight on Election Day of 2020, conceivably the busiest media day of the year, to make sure that no one reported it. But even Robert Mueller could not sugarcoat the fact that he, by his own admission, said that I could not be prosecuted in connection with Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration because there was no factual basis for that claim. He actually went on to say that even if he had found that I received materials from WikiLeaks, which he did not, that would not have been illegal under previous case law. So the attempt to destroy me and my family in order to pressure me to testify falsely against President Donald Trump was a crucible that I got through only through my faith and because of the support of my family. Last night I posted the pictures on X of my wife at 75 years old, hard of hearing, but still beautiful, both inside and out, being perp walked out of our house at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's what these people have done. That's why the president was justified in firing FBI agents involved not only in his persecution, but also in my persecution. Enrique Tarrio, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. Love you guys. Thank you.
All right. God bless you. The other great news this week, if you haven't had time to watch the hearings in which Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and Kash Patel went before the U.S. Senate, it is something to behold. Robert F. Kennedy continues to have my respect as for both his integrity and his brilliance. I could not have controlled my Sicilian temper, but he handled himself extraordinarily well in the face of withering criticism from U.S. senators who have literally taken millions and millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry that Kennedy seeks to hold accountable for their actions. Particularly egregious was Bernie Sanders, who said that he took, honking away as usual, not a single penny from pharmaceutical executives, when in fact you can go to the FEC records and see that he took millions from Big Pharma. But he was undone by the Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, sometimes referred to as Pocahontas, fake Indian. Remember, she lied about her ethnic heritage in order to get preferential treatment in her education. And she has actually taken more money from Big Pharma than the socialist senator from Vermont, who, by the way, skimmed millions of dollars in media commissions from his 2 presidential campaigns to pay for his 3 homes and his top-of-the-line Mercedes. Socialism for thee, but not for me, when it comes to Bernie Sanders. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Roger Stone Show. Hope you enjoyed our discussion of the upcoming releases by President Donald Trump of the documents, classified documents pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. Now, folks, don't go away, because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra. Until next week, God bless you and Godspeed.